Have fun. Stay awake for the next 14 hours, guys. Take care.
Easy work. Thank you, Sean. Well appreciated.
So, Jonathan, for those that don't know you, can we have a little introduction from you?
I'll give you a whistle stop tour. Firstly, thanks very much to both of you for hosting this. Appreciate it takes a lot of time and effort to put this all together. It's not just the click the button and go. It's a case of getting everything organised. So I do appreciate that very much. I'm sure everyone else does as well. I'll be as succinct as possible. I'll just say I'm a 28-year-old carnivore bodybuilder. I've been following the diet since February the 2nd, 2020. So it's roughly 3.5 or so years. I first experimented with the diet when I was I believe I was 14 or 15, maybe 16 years old. I did a diet of tuna and eggs for a bodybuilding competition for 5 months. Didn't really work. I didn't have enough saturated fat, not enough cholesterol. Came back to it a few years later. I noticed at that time I had some positive effects on my digestion. I tried it again. I noticed when I had vegetables and fruits and things, I felt more inflamed, felt worse. So I got rid of those back in February 2020. And I actually used it partially to help diagnose the issue that I have in my spine. I have something called spondylitic spondylolisthesis in the L5-S1 vertebrae. That means I've got trapped nerves in my spine, which causes me a real pain in the backside. And up until then, it just caused me that. Now it causes me pain in the hip as well. I had a spinal fusion surgery in December the 12th last year. So I'm roughly 7 months post spinal fusion. I have found actually the diet has got my inflammatory markers as close to zero as they can possibly get. So it's been very effective in that kind of regard. And with that being said, I'm kind of looking at the diet now from a multifaceted approach. So the fact that I suffer with autistic spectrum disorder, I've noticed my cognition is far better. My ability to communicate is far better. My sensory kind of input isn't as frustrating to deal with. I suffer with something called synesthesia. So oftentimes I'll experience senses as I speak or do anything, which can be quite frustrating, but it does make life quite a hell of a journey. But I think that's pretty much it. Other than that, I'm a nutrition consultant. I specialise mostly on the carnivore diet. I work with bodybuilders and average folk, just as I'm sure both of you guys do. I tend to go more towards the body composition side of it. So I'm kind of at that funnel after when people have got healthy. Okay, now I want to build my muscle, lose fat. That's where I'm at basically right now.
And do you know Rich?
I have not met Rich, but I believe I may have crossed him at the PHC UK.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Because I mean, we're such a small community, within the UK. Yet there's so many people that I haven't met or heard of either. But we've got to fix that. I think, haven't we? I think events like this will allow us to network. Because I come from the bodybuilding background also. It took over my life for a number of years. I've come away from it now. As you can tell, I'm considerably smaller. But same as you, adopting the lifestyle, removing the plant toxins, phytoalexins allowed me to thrive in a sport that is heavily carb dominated. At the time, I was one of only 2 or 3 low carb ketogenic athletes. And I remember time with the British Championship. I won the British Championship in my category, and a gentleman who won in his, a friend of mine, is also ketogenic. The guy that came second to him was also, so the 3 ketogenic people at the time came first, second and third, and obviously 2 of them were in one category. But we were ostracized from the community because he was so heavily carb dominated that I was the weirdo in the corner that didn't consume carbohydrate. But it soon started to turn heads. When you turn up year after year, you become leaner and bigger, and you're gaining more mass than anyone else, and your condition's coming on point, and you start winning comps. It does start to turn heads. Fantastic, and kudos to you. I think this is the ideal lifestyle for tackling and blocking NLRP3 inflammasome, which is responsible for a lot of the inflammatory signaling within the body. I don't suffer a severe with you in regards to inflammation, but I have always had inflammatory problems which are barely non-existent anymore, and for me it's been absolutely life-changing, and it sounds like it's been life-changing for you so far as well, so kudos to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you've had success with it as well. It sounds like, I'm sure you guys talked about this loads of times already now. It's been like 10 hours in nearly. You need carbs to build muscle. You need carbs to train. Obviously not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 110 kilos. I'm really, really, really strong. I'm really, really, really fast. I'm quite muscular as well. So I kind of shine like Sean, like yourself, and I'm sure quite a few others that you don't need carbs to build muscle.
No carbs.
No, you don't.
No carbs.
And
for sure.
I think we've got some questions for you, Jonathan, if that's okay. And obviously, I'd like Rich to chime in as well.
Sure.
I think he was a bit starstruck with Sean there. I've never seen him so quiet. But anyway,
I didn't get a chance to get anything in. I think it was so short, and I didn't. Obviously, there was a few people who had paid, isn't it, to ask a few questions.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take up the time. I was ready to jump in anyway, to be honest, but I didn't want to take up the questions. But you know me, give me the mic for 2 minutes, and I'll take it for 2 hours. So.
I think what happened when I was trying to organise this was I didn't know who we'd get. I'm going to be really honest here, and Anthony Chafee was so generous because he was the first person. Well, you arranged that, Rich, and he said, "Oh, I'll do the first 3 hours." So I just assumed, maybe if we do that, we're not going to get enough guests. So I reduced the time down to sort of like a maximum of an hour, and I got so many people wanting to do it. In the end, it was all we could do was half an hour. So Sean was the last one in. So we only had half an hour, and he's one of the biggest names in carnivore. So anyway, right, here we go. So Sonny's asked, "Hi, if I'm not counting calories, how do I calculate percentages?"
That's an excellent question. Anyone that's worth their weight, I'd say, is not counting calories. It's a very outdated concept. I won't go into here. I'm sure you guys have tons of videos. I do as well. Percentages now, they can be a useful guide. The way you'd work that out is work out how many, percentages, ratios can be used interchangeably. I believe it's something like 80-20 in regards to fat to protein. If you're doing something like, say, 200 fat, 100 protein, that's how you'd work it out. Basically 2-to-1, that would be 80-20. And then from there, you'd know, would it be about 60-40 would be something like 1-to-1, or 66-33 it would be 1-to-1, something like that. I'm personally not the biggest advocate of percentages, ratios, calories. As you guys have said, actually, I was listening to you guys earlier, you do have a protein and an individual fat requirement. I'm sure you've probably said it, and I'm sure Dr. Chafee said at the very start. You're not looking at these things as some kind of mix match thing. The amount you need for each specific nutrient is very individual. I've spoken to some carnivores that are having as much as maybe 90% fat if you're talking about calories. And there's people as low as maybe 30% fat. But people are doing 30% though, they're doing it for a short phase to drop body fat very quickly. So protein sparing modified fast. What I'm finding with several hundred people I've spoken to over the past, 7, 8, 9 months I've been carnivore coaching, so to speak, is people tend to fall around a 1-to-1 ratio of protein to fat. Especially at the start when they're less fat adapted, they're not taking as much fat in a given period of time. So what I'm looking at for most people is find your protein grams. I know you guys have pretty similar views to me. I literally listened to a bit with Coach Bronson earlier. I believe he said 1 to 1.25 grams per pound of lean body mass. My recommendation is 1.75 grams per kilo of fat-free mass. The reason why I use fat-free mass is fat-free mass that does alter. That would include your bone itself. Your bone is an adaptive material in the body, so that can go up and down. So I think, although yes, you can use your lean body mass, why not include bone as well? That's an adaptive substance itself within your body. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand with it. And I think the variation between that in terms of maybe it could be maybe 10 to 15% either side. So some people might be doing maybe 1.5, some people might be doing about 2, something like that. So for myself, as a point of reference, I don't stick to that myself. The reason being is I have a large fat-free mass. I've tried doing 1.75 grams, but I noticed my appetite goes up for more. If I go for a walk, it goes up even higher. If I do anything in my day, it'll go up even further and further and further. So that's why I'm giving a large bracket for a lot of people. Then from there, once you found that protein grammage, you'll look at your fat grams. You might start at that 1-to-1. So for example, someone on maybe 120 protein might be on 120 fat. What you then look at is, there's a few things you can look at. Subjective markers like your sleep quality, your recovery from gym if you go to the gym and exercise, your scale weight, your digestion, anything you can kind of give a rough estimate on. So you might give yourself a score on day 1. How do you feel on day 1? Then from there, you'd go to say day 2, day 3, day 4. Give each marker a score of 10. And you can say, okay, that macro ratio, that grammage didn't work. It did work. From there, you then up or minus protein or fat grams. You can sometimes up them at the same time and sometimes lower them at the same time. You'll notice this if you drop too much weight or gain too much weight at a given period of time. That's kind of where I stand on ratios and macros. They can be useful tools at the beginning, but for me, that's my summary of macros, what to do, how to start, and where I'd go from there. Of course, follow your appetite as well.
Well, Rich, I thought you were going to unmute there. Did you want to add to that?
I am. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's I think, doing it that way is probably more this how I began measuring early on was the fat-free mass, but it is more difficult to measure, and that's why I tend to round it. So I believe, we 1.75 per kilogram is about 0.8 for fat-free mass, isn't it? So yeah, that's probably in the same ballpark as 1 gram per pound, more or less, give or take, I think. Would you agree, more or less?
Yeah. Yeah.
So as a ballpark figure, and again, as you say, everyone is individual, and it's a case of finding that, putting that fork in the ground and seeing how you react to that. Unfortunately, everybody wants results immediately, don't they? So it's incredibly difficult to gauge results early on in regards to building lean mass unless you've got access to a body composition machine, which I'm lucky enough to have one. We've bought one for the shop, and that's how I was measuring for competitions, which is fantastic. It's about 99% accurate to a DEXA scan. Fantastic way. And what I proved with that while prepping for a comp, now, as you know from the bodybuilding community, what we are told is when we are cutting, you cannot build lean mass. My lean mass increased ever so slightly, but I didn't lose any, which is absolutely goes against everything that we've been taught in regards to calories. And coming back to what you said earlier in regards to calories are so antiquated. It's not the calories that govern whether we gain or lose weight. The caloric model is highly flawed. It doesn't account for many things amongst insulin, the effect of insulin. It's the endocrine system that governs whether we gain or lose weight. The caloric model doesn't account for thermic effect of protein, ketogenesis, metabolic rate, the effect of lectins on insulin. So highly antiquated. And as you say, anyone within our space that works in calories anymore, I have no time for. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just they are so far behind the times in regards to body composition, health and well-being. The caloric model, as you rightly say, is highly flawed, and I think there are better metrics to use if you want to track. That is, I think, in your space for athletic performance, it's good to track. But I don't track anymore per se. The only thing that I measure is my body fat percentage on the in-body occasionally. But you can do this incredibly cheap. Now, one of the best tools that I found was a body fat percentage caliper, which you can buy for about £5 online. I didn't use this for the conversion into body fat. I just used it to measure the millimeter of my fat fold. And that's a fantastic gauge, because what I found, and it's probably similar to you, when you get to a certain point, your body fat percentage will come down incredibly, but the weight will stay. The last couple of pounds almost don't seem to shift yet. You go from looking, you go to look like Skeletor. Those you get death face. You look incredibly lean, but the weight has barely changed on the scale. But that measure tape, although body fat calipers will show a difference. So they're a handy tool to have, incredibly cheap. I don't know about you, but I try not to go by the scale too much either. The scales, I think, don't give a full picture in regards to weight loss, fat percentage, muscle gain, etc. But yeah, love that. Well on board.
Yeah. just very, very briefly, because I want to get through as much as I can. I like bioimpedance scales, not that they're accurate. Mine reads me at 19% body fat. I'm not 19% body fat. But it does provide me with a trend, so I can reliably find a trend line, so I can see what's happening. DEXA scan is, of course, much better metric. What I do like to use is before a competition is a body fat caliper, like you said, so you can get digital ones online for like £5-6, and you just measure the thickness of your abdomen, find an easy to access part of your body that you can just pinch. Okay, starting day 1, 10 millimeters. Week later, 9, 8, 7, there'll be 7, 7, 7, 6, 6, so it'll go down very slowly, but the lowest you'll probably get it over your whole body is about 3 millimeters. That's what I could get it to. The back of the calf, the bicep, maybe 2 millimeters, but beyond that, you can't get much leaner.
Yeah, 0.5 I got to was my lowest, which was incredible. Crazy. In fact, it's not 0.5, it'd be 1, because they go up in sections of 2, don't they, on the non-digital. So that would be about 1 mil, which gave me a body fat percentage of about 2%, 2.5 kilograms of fat in my entire body, which isn't healthy. I'm not telling people to do that. It's not healthy to compete, but it is fit for purpose, isn't it? I didn't win on size. I won on condition. Nobody else could bring the condition that I did, and it's going to be the same story with you when you get on stage, because we have the ability to burn fat. Unlike anybody else on the planet, this is what we do. We're fat burners, and that's why we take that condition to stage.
We got a question from Andy there, by the way, which is intriguing for a lot of people. Jonathan, know your story. Doesn't lifting very heavy weights have a bad effect on your spine?
I do like this question a lot. This is a very, very fair question. So Stephen Thomas there and we did a video on this maybe 6 months ago. I've covered it. I kind of documented my spine fusion surgery before and after on my channel in a few different ways. And what I found is I've had to, over the years, change my training routine, revamp it. I'm at the point now where I don't do loaded squats at all. I don't do deadlifts, bent over rows, anything which loads the spine. What I found is I'm able to use more time and attention, use more specific exercises. It's less compound lifts, and I can still lift very, very safely. I've got a few videos of me training on my channel, and you can watch me do my stuff. It's some older stuff, maybe 1, 2, 3 months old. And you'll see my form is immaculate. I can honestly say that. And if I had a client come to me and show me that video and say that was them, I'd say perfect. It really, really is top notch. And I think people think they apply good form, but they really don't. So form doesn't just mean in the gym that you're lifting something from A to B and you're doing it slowly. No, it means so much more than that. It means your instinctual thought and your intuition as you're lifting a weight, for example, in a shoulder press, is that the bar is actually going in one direction and you're using muscles to resist it. So it's not you're focusing moving your hand up, it's you're using your shoulder, bringing your arm up. So it applies internally. So you can't see that in someone's training methodology, but what you'll find is the biggest bodybuilders, ones with the most success, will often be the ones with the most mind muscle activation. So that's how you'll see a pro bodybuilder on stage, show their training videos. They'll be pushing it out, ripping it fast, but they have tremendous mind muscle connection. That's how they get away with it. For people like me, I can't train like that anymore. I have to use less inertia, be a lot more careful. In terms of concentric and eccentric phase, so the lifting phase and lowering phase, I like to apply maybe 3 to 5 seconds up and maybe 3 to 6 seconds down for most things. That's a broad sort of range of what I'm doing. So yeah, limit inertia, safe form, safe exercises, be specific. And it does seem to work. I've gained 2 kilos of fat-free mass since my surgery. So go figure.
That's brilliant, Jonathan. A great answer as well. And just to sort of broadening out and look on the flip, if you've had surgery and you do nothing and you just lay on the bed because you're too scared to do anything, that's actually going to be more deleterious. I promise you. You know, the old phrase about motion is lotion is really true. You do have to do it, but obviously with good form, understand your technique, and don't push yourself too hard where you're not doing the right exercise. Really, that's it. So Sandra's asking, in breaking through body composition plateaus, have you cycled the protein fat ratios to keep the body from acclimatizing?
Yes, I have done that. Oh, I'll try and give a very quick one. We didn't get long, do we? If you're doing a long diet and you've got a lot of fat to cut off, I recommend to people that they have a diet break in between it. I'd say if you're doing any kind of diet phase, which is maybe more than 12, 14 weeks, have a break in the middle. It doesn't mean come off a diet, but it means maybe go to baseline, maybe what you started with, something like that. Maybe a 2-week phase. And that's if you're dieting for a long, long time. Now, what I like to do is sometimes have what we call in bodybuilding like a fat cycle or a macronutrient cycle. I think they call it carb cycling. So you'll just have maybe 2 days where you'll increase your food intake. That will help get your leptin signaling correct, as in your appetite will be lower, your metabolic rate will go higher, your thyroid output will go higher, your breathing, your performance, your ability to train, everything will go up basically. So then you'll be able to actually dig further into the fat loss phase. So yes, I do apply protein and fat cycling. Again, in terms of ratio, not a ratio thing for me. It's individual protein and fat grams as separate levers. I find that, you can't eat protein forever higher and higher to the point that you don't get some ill effect. Eventually something will happen. I've experimented up to 550 grams of protein a day for a period of, I believe it was 9 months. Every single day, around 550 grams. And that was my baseline average. That was because I was binge eating and I just liked food a lot. And I had a way of satiating myself. Little did I know, long term, not ideal. The glycation from the excess carbohydrates, the glucose from gluconeogenesis, not ideal. It can distress the gut. The idea is to give your body exactly what it needs, no more, no less. You'll never be perfect, but the idea is to get as close as you can through different measurements that I mentioned earlier. Now, protein and fat ratios, grams. You can take the fat grams quite low, but the longer you do it, the more of a negative feedback response you'll get. So it's not something I aim to sort of continue. I think things like that should be used for no longer than maybe 2 to 3 days at a time. So you might do one maintenance sort of day in a week, maybe 2 or 3 moderate days, then 2 or 3 low days. They're not hard and fast rules. It's not like my prescription to someone, so don't try and follow this. But consult with me, Stephen, or Richard, and you'll find the right answer basically. But that's kind of the sort of thing I'd do. And how do I change that around training? We always have a protein requirement. We have a protein balance we're trying to keep to retain nitrogen within our muscles, so we can have that protein synthesis balance, basically keeping things going, basically, so you don't lose muscle. I like to keep protein quite consistent throughout the whole week. And as I get leaner, I might raise protein a little bit higher just to satiate myself a bit more, because protein is very satiating. You can almost, in effect, not entirely true, but you kind of can, get away with eating more and more protein to hit that hunger threshold, and still cut body fat. There's studies where people have eaten, I believe, 4.4 grams of protein per kilo of body weight and still lost body fat and retained some good lean mass. So you can do that, but it's not advised. The idea is to get exactly what you need and just stick it out. But like the Keto Pro said, if you're trying to get very lean, you will suffer. It will be hard. It'll be difficult when your body fat's like a millimeter or something. It'll be horrendous, and it will test you. It will test your mind. It's a battle of the mind, not the body, I think.
Brilliant, Jonathan. I can see Casey in the waiting room, but we're going to you've generated a lot of questions. So that's great. So can we do this one? If OMAD causes indigestion constipation, would you suggest more small meals with mixed fat and protein, or one bigger protein meal and fat spread throughout the day?
Yeah. So it depends how much the person's eating for a start point. You need a reference value. If someone is eating 300 grams of protein and fat and they're doing OMAD, well, you're not going to feel very good, are you? So you need to know exactly what that person is doing. So I couldn't give out prescriptive advice for that one. If you're doing something sensible and saying you're maintaining your weight, you can split your meals up a little bit. Ideally, the goal isn't to have 10 feedings in a day. I think you can maximize muscle protein synthesis with about 4, maybe 5 meals, but it won't give you like much margin of gains in terms of muscle building if that's what you're trying to achieve. It's like fractions of percentages probably. The main thing is getting in the protein that you need in a given day. Now, if you've got indigestion, I'd recommend lowering the amount of protein and fat in each sitting, splitting it up a little bit. So first, obviously, do the minimal effective dose, so to speak. So if you're doing OMAD, do 2 MAD, test it out, give it a week, 3 MAD, 4 MAD, that sort of thing. Probably wouldn't go more than 4 MAD unless you're about my size, to be honest. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think as long as your protein is high enough in a given sitting, you shouldn't run into any issues. But the idea is you upregulate your gallbladder to synthesize enzymes and bile acid and stuff, which then goes to the liver, which then gets dealt with that way, or another way around. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And this could be both of you, actually, and then we get Casey in. Probably have to be a bit brief. Should carnivores train differently in the gym than people that eat carbs?
No. To keep it brief, no. What you may find is if you're initially transitioning, you may have a few days or weeks period where it will be tough. You might have electrolyte disturbance. You might not have the full oomph that you did in the gym. You might feel a bit dry. That's what's kind of word that we use in bodybuilding. Like you feel a bit dry. Give it a few weeks. You won't know if you're fat adapted until you get to the point where you match your previous lifts in the gym. So I'd say no, your training doesn't have to change, but you might notice that your intensity level may go down because you cannot give it that welly because you're not fat adapted. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Training stays the same. Coming back to a point you made earlier in regards to eccentric and concentric movements, I made a similar transition a while ago. I started to concentrate on eccentric movements over concentric. My timings were slightly different. It was more to 4 to 5 down and sort of 2 to 3 up. But again, I moved away from all the heavy compound lifts because of injury. So a similar story there in regards to the form and movements and eccentric, concentric movements. Training, same. Yeah, I've always I've lifted weights the same. So what I have implemented is the amount of time that I spend in the gym. In the beginning, I was spending 2 to 3 hours. Education along the years has led me to believe that this is counterintuitive because the elevation of cortisol. We live and learn. Rep ranges change. I found the sweet spot to be around 12 sets in each movement, 45 minutes to an hour, and I found that I get all the best gains. You don't need to spend ridiculous amounts of hours in there. And yeah, agree with everything else that you just said. So yeah,
beautiful.
All good.
So Jonathan's going to tag Casey Ruff, who's just entered the studio. Jonathan, do you know Casey?
I know Casey.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. High five. Oh, which way?
Other way.
Wrong
Wait, that
side. Try again.
Mirror reverse. I'm not very good at mirrors.
Oh. I trained chest today. My chest bit.
Great to see you guys.
It's great. Rich,
Excellent.
Oh man, what an enjoyable hour. That was incredible.
Awesome. Brilliant.
Thank you.
I'll
Right.
enjoy it. This is hour 11 for us, I think.
Yeah,
isn't
we're
it?
on to
Hour-
the 11th hour.
Yeah.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Composition consultant. In
Thank
the
you.
description for this video, all his links. So if you want to hook up with Jonathan, that's great. I think he's live streamed this to Facebook as well. So that's interesting. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jonathan. It'd be great to touch base outside of this and
Cheers, take care.
a podcast if
See you
you're
in a
up for that. Oh, we are. Gone.
Excellent.
Bye.
If you, awesome. There we are.
Right.
Sure if it was
Yeah, sorry to be
Thank
so blunt. Right, Casey, introduce yourself to the broader public who don't know who you are.